I don't transfer the drawing usually onto the plain white paper. I usually put this on first and then spread it around and then use a light table to transfer my sketch underneath it. But for the sake of doing this demo, I figured it would be more interesting if I show you how to do this too. But so I kind of just use it like a salt shaker. And you really don't need a whole lot. A lot of times when I do pieces that have a lot of color to them, I'll use tone paper, like BFK Reeves paper, which is comes in tan, and I really like that. But with this, I can actually just I can do the majority of my drawing just with the eraser instead of with pencils. So you can get a lot of really interesting shapes with this because it's not just a flat line. You can form it to whatever shape that you want and get a lot of cool values. And the paper that I'm using is Stonehenge paper. Just in my experience, it's been the toughest paper as far as erasing. When you erase, it doesn't peel up a whole lot. It takes a lot of force to actually tear it. But you still have to be careful every once in a while. With this graphite, it takes a few passes to really get the values where you need them to be. And just wipe off the excess. At this point, that's when I would transfer the drawing. But now you can just start going in and start laying down values. And so I usually just like going in with this big eraser and for me, whenever I transfer a drawing, I normally don't worry about using my reference as I use it for like scale and stuff and for proportion, but as far as lighting goes, I like to play around with lighting a lot more. So I usually try and ignore the lighting on the subject that I'm using and just kind of put it in as I'm drawing. But that's just like a stylistic choice for me. It seems like a lot more fun, a lot more interesting when the subject is in, it's not totally photorealistic because the lighting's not exactly right. So at this point I have to decide if I want the foreground figure to be lighter or darker than the background. So I'm probably going to go darker than the background. And so this initial step when you're taking the graphite away, you're going to get a lot of graphite onto this eraser. And so it's going to make it really patchy and uneven. So you don't really need to worry about smoothness at this point because like I said, you're going to be going through a couple layers of this erasing, and as you go through and smooth them out with a tissue in between each step of erasing, you're going to notice a lot more smoothness to the piece. So you can see like the figure, this rat figure, emerging. Like let's say I'm putting this rat in and I'm like, oh wait, he doesn't really have a tail because I forgot to add that in or got lost. I can just take some of the graphite that's still on this, just rub it back into the paper, generally where I need it to go, and then you can just go back and trace out what you need to trace out with with the eraser. So now that this is kind of like roughly planned out, like I go through like one eraser for every drawing because these erasers get so full of graphite. I learned about this method when I was like in art camp in like 8th grade, and it was always the most fun for me. I think for me, it's been really intimidating to just look at a stark white piece of paper and kind of figure out what's supposed to go on there. And with this, the method is a lot easier to just let the medium take over rather than having me in control the whole time. So you have a lot more variables to play around with, where you get a lot of mistakes that end up making the piece look a little bit more genuine and adds a little bit of style to it. So I just blended that in a little bit more. So now that when I take out even more, you have a really even tone, and you can start using this eraser kind of as like a shading tool, because now you can start focusing on what the darker areas are. You can start, like if I wanted the background to go from lighter to darker, I can get like a smoother gradient. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to, so like if I want the kind of the claws to stand out a little bit, I can start going in with this. And I really try and save using pencils till the absolute last point that I need to. Just because when you wind up using pencils for the drawing, the points are so small that you wind up getting really caught up in the details and not the overall values of it. And I think with this method, the most important thing to focus on is value. That's really what brings the piece forward. And so I think of it less of putting down a drawing on a piece of paper, and think of it more as like a sculpture and kind of like chiseling out of the marble. So you have the graphite as the marble, and you're slowly pulling away with the erasers. And just with the different types of erasers that you can get so many different just marks. And so like a lot of times when I just do backgrounds and like trees and stuff, I just make different shapes like that, and then kind of show the background of the sky behind them. Especially like with forest scenes, like this is a really kind of organic mark making process that you can get a whole different amount of values out of. And so like your first go around with whenever you put this graphite down, it's always going to look a lot rougher. So you need to go a couple times over, see how it's slowly darkening. And that way you get more and more layers, which makes the piece softer and softer as you go. If you want to do some like fur texture on this guy, we should figure out where the lighting's coming from, you know? So we could say that it's coming from underneath him. But definitely with this method, I have to figure out kind of how much color I want to put onto it, because whenever I do digital with this method, it's a little bit more difficult to get brighter colors on a piece. So if I know that the image is either going to be finished black and white or desaturated, then I'll probably use this method. So now you can start going in maybe with some really sharp highlights. I'll bring out the eye a little bit, and then you can start going. Well, I mean, then I start going in with pencils to darken up the little areas that need some detail to them. It's really easy to, when you're working on this, to make a lot of the edges soft. So it's important to go back and make sure that you have some actual hard edges to bring some attention to certain areas in the drawing. Probably the ratio of time spent on the final image and then the amount of time on the sketch is about the same. Like I probably spend like a third of the time on the piece making sure that the sketch is right underneath. Just for me, that's always the most important part. I'll spend a lot less time working on the details of the background, because just the way I do backgrounds, it's a lot less not a lot less important than the figure, but just I can have more freedom with the background. The figure with more details, I need to make sure that all the proportions are right. And a lot of times, like I just won't even draw in the background. I'll just decide what I want there, what I want to be there when I'm actually doing the final drawing, because it adds a little bit more of a interesting touch to it. I really hate when everything is super chiseled. It just feels really static, a lot less flowy. So if I force myself to not plan out almost everything, then it can be a little bit looser. And from this point on, then I would just spend like hours and hours and hours just like doing details and then erasing them and then putting them back and then erasing them. So once you get these values down, you can go in with a pencil and kind of do the finer shading. But I try and do as much of the work as I can with the eraser before I need to do that. So if I want, if I do this, and I say, like his other arm seems like I want it to be a little bit darker, I can just have some graphite on this and go in and then do a little bit more direct shading to certain areas. It spreads it a lot more smoothly. That's about it, guys. She